What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review Joker, Folie, Deux, and that's the last time I'll attempt a French accent. From here on out, I'm calling it Joker 2, but I just saw it in IMAX, and I'm ready to share a few thoughts. And I'll go spoiler-free at first, and then I'll give you a verbal warning as well as a time code below for a spoiler-light discussion at the end of the video. But at this point, all the spoilers are out there. Hordes of fans are seeing the movie tonight in IMAX, so tread lightly if you're trying to avoid the ending online, because I expect discussions of the ending are going to be the main source of debate the rest of the week. In any case, Joker 2 reunites Joaquin Phoenix with director Todd Phillips. Their first film is one of the most profitable films of the 21st century, an R-rated movie about a supervillain where Phoenix won an Oscar, so this was always going to be a tough act to follow. And I'd heard a few negative reactions ahead of time, so I went into the movie with very low expectations. But I ended up enjoying the movie more than I thought I would, so try and ignore any and all positive comments that I might share about this movie, because I want other people to have the same experience that I did, basically being happily surprised in spite of having plenty of issues with the movie. In particular, the running time of 2 hours and 18 minutes, which I was definitely feeling by the end of the film. But the reality is, people absolutely love and adore this interpretation of the character. There was one guy at my screening in full Arthur Fleck, makeup and regalia, but the Lady Gaga fans were out in force as well. For like the first 30 minutes or so, like basically every time she even looked at the camera or said a word, there was applause, or maybe they were just diehard Harley Quinn fans, who knows? But my audience was definitely primed and ready for action. But the question is, how are folks going to react to this specific story that Todd Phillips has chosen to tell? Because this is not your typical Joker, the clown prince of crime versus the Batman story. This is a musical, not just one or two songs. It is a full-blown musical, the kind of movie that directors like Vincent Minnelli or Busby Berkeley or Stanley Donen used to make back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s on a regular basis. And let me say from the word go, I've seen a lot of classic musicals starring people like Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly, but I would not call myself a diehard fan. I ended up walking out of that Wonka movie this past Christmas just because they started singing during the opening credits. And I've lived in New York for 16 years, and I've been to see one musical, The Book of Mormon, and the reason I saw that was because of Trey Parker and Matt Stone. So I think your enjoyment of the film will vary wildly depending upon your love of musicals and also the style of music in the movie, because some of the songs are very traditional, kind of Broadway show tunes. Some are more like kind of loving homages to like Sonny and Cher in the 1970s and that sort of thing. But with some of the songs, like early on, I wanted to crawl inside my chair and just get away from the experience on the screen. However, there are also one or two songs where I could feel legitimate chills going up my neck. I was like, oh, this is why people love musicals, because of these moments where like the emotions of the film become so intense that the characters have no choice but to burst into song. So once again, I think there's going to be a lot of healthy debate about the merits or the lack thereof of some of the musical choices in this movie. But the story this time around is quite different from the first movie. It's basically a big, giant courtroom drama, yet another old-school genre that Hollywood used to love, but has basically ignored for decades. But it's also, in a lot of ways, like a men in prison movie with Arthur Fleck's daily routine in Arkham Asylum as he and Harley slowly fall in love. But I have to say, I found it incredibly refreshing to watch Todd Phillips take such a huge creative swing, even if maybe he only hit like a single or a double instead of a big home run. Because in contrast to a lot of sequels these days, most of them just try to basically replicate the exact same experience from the first movie, something this movie very successfully avoids. Or worse, there are a lot of franchises out there where they just like kind of pick and choose familiar scenes from earlier, kind of older movies, throw them into a blender, and then give us much crummier versions of those scenes, thinking somehow that the audience just recognizes something that they see on screen, that they'll start clapping like seals. But with this movie, whether you love it, whether you hate it, or you're just completely indifferent to it, no one can deny that Todd Phillips is going for a very unusual movie-going experience. And yeah, don't be surprised if you and your friends and your family members are all very divided on this movie, or just leave the movie scratching your head. I heard a lot of people going like, wait, what? Like, anyway, I could just tell a lot of people didn't quite know what to make of the movie. But here's the good news. Every once in a while, the movie really comes together and starts to shine. Well, you'll have these kind of traditional soundstage, musical sequences where Joker and Harley are putting on a show, very self-consciously putting on a show for the audience. And Joaquin Phoenix, he'll just be standing there, like chain smoking with this feverish intensity. It's like looking lustily up and down at Harley, just totally in love with her, all while she's singing and dancing her ass off. And, news alert, Lady Gaga's really good at singing and dancing. Like, we've seen Harley Quinn in animation and in live action now many times. We've never seen her quite like this. And Lady Gaga, I feel like she's had some bad luck of being in movies like, what was that movie about, this fashion, like about the Gucci's that Ridley Scott made, where she was really good, but the movie was a mess. Like, I feel like she's got all the chops and all the talent in the world to be a big, successful actress, but she just hasn't had a lot of luck yet, apart from the movie A Star Is Born. But together, Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, they make a very unusual but very compelling duo, because Joaquin Phoenix, he's got all that insane intensity as an actor, but Lady Gaga, she can sing and dance. Like, obviously, like Joaquin Phoenix, like, to put it charitably, I thought his singing was pretty miserable in Walk the Line if you compare it to actually like Johnny Cash songs. Like, I love Johnny Cash, and while I liked Walk the Line quite a bit, I liked it because of Joaquin Phoenix's acting, not because of his singing. Although Reese Witherspoon, she sang her ass off in that movie. But in this movie, I mean, no one's going to come away from it saying that, oh my God, like Joaquin Phoenix, how come he didn't have a career as a singer? Like, his singing is a little rough. But there's one scene that's kind of a loving homage to the Sonny and Cher show from the 1970s, where Lady Gaga, once she really finds her groove, I was like, this is fucking awesome. Like more of this, please. And the scene was heartbreakingly brief. I couldn't believe that they cut her off right as she was really kind of getting her momentum going. But hopefully the soundtrack to the movie will include a full version of that song, because I just want to hear how the song ends. But speaking of this movie being kind of a throwback to old school musicals and old school prison dramas and that sort of thing, it also is another ingredient that's been missing from Hollywood movies for far too long: smoking. And I feel like once upon a time, all Hollywood actors smoked. I mean, they would chain smoke religiously throughout their movies. You can watch like old like Bogey and Bacall movies like The Big Sleep, where the entire movie, they're just lighting cigarettes for each other, and it's sexy as hell. And like, let's be clear. If somebody were to light a cigarette in my apartment, I'd be like, please take that cigarette outside. But on the screen, it rocks. It's incredibly erotic. Watching two people smoke together, it just makes them look cool. I know you're not supposed to say, oh, people look cool when they're smoking, but they do. So as far as the chemistry goes between Lady Gaga and Joaquin Phoenix when they're performing, I'm going to give them both an A+. They really just hold nothing back. I mean, they're singing, dancing, tap dancing, beating people to death. Like, just, it's pure, total mayhem. But I think the reality is this movie is going to be a tough sell with a lot of people. Musicals are not necessarily in vogue these days. We see a lot of movies that will hide the fact that they're a musical in their trailer and then be a musical on the screen. Like, why make a musical if you have to conceal the fact that you're a musical? Like, are you that worried that people don't like musicals? Like, anyway, I wouldn't say it's a dead genre, because every once in a while a musical will come along that will do really, really well. Like Bohemian Rhapsody is not really a musical. It's more of like a musical biopic, but people do like music in movies. But it is a tough sell, especially in the superhero genre. And what's interesting is how a lot of this movie is concerned with the idea of like showmanship and creating fantasies and the degree to which you want to give people what they want. Because in this movie, Joker, not Arthur Fleck, but Joker has legions of psychotic fans, of which Harley Quinn is one, and he also has a lot of imitators, a lot of copycats. But part of the defense in his trial is like to what degree can he like lay the blame of his crimes at the feet of Joker versus his character of Arthur Fleck? Like, does he have a split personality? Is he responsible for his actions? But the bigger question is, like, what do his fans want in the movie, and what do fans of the first movie want in terms of like moviegoers and that sort of thing? Because if you're a fan of Batman and the Batman universe and its incredible rogues gallery, and Batman has the best rogues gallery of any superhero ever created, but if you're a diehard fan of Gotham, either from video games or comic books or from live action or from animation, everybody has a different idea of like what's their perfect Batman experience or the perfect Joker experience. But sometimes like the real trick is give the people what they want, but at the same time make it feel surprising and new. It's an interesting creative enigma. Like, how do you give the people what they want, but at the same time let them feel surprised or perhaps even occasionally challenged? Because sometimes people don't know what they want until they see it. And then when they see it, they're like, oh my God, my whole life I've been waiting for this experience, even though I didn't know it. And I suspect there'll be some people who feel that way about Joker Folie à Deux, because they might not have ever seen any classic musicals. People are like, oh my God, I had no idea that I love musicals, and I want to go back and watch all these classic musicals now. And there are going to be other people like, dude, I just want to see Joker and Batman fucking fight. Like, in the words of Jack Nicholson from the Tim Burton Batman from 1989, where is the Batman?
And where is the Batman? He's at home, washing his tights.
Because I'm still not entirely sure that it's a good idea making supervillain movies where they don't go to battle with their classic kind of like, arch nemesis or their counterpart. Like Sony's been seeing some diminishing returns on this front, making Venom movies where Venom never interacts with Spider-Man, which for me, that is just the height of idiocy. Or a Morbius movie where Morbius doesn't interact with Spider-Man. And I'm sure the same is going to hold true for Kraven the Hunter. Like those villains, like Spider-Man has a rogues gallery that's almost as good as Batman's. Let Spider-Man and his villains interact. That's where the magic happens. That said, there are exceptions, like the new show Penguin on HBO is pretty damn good. It's quite different in terms of the genre from Joker, but I'd say it's about the same level of quality, where if you just want to see a good old-fashioned like gangster saga, but with a character who's a classic supervillain, Penguin totally delivers, but they throw a bone to the audience by at least early on mentioning the fact that Batman exists in that world. For me, Gotham is not Gotham unless there's a certain caped crusader jumping off rooftops, beating the shit out of people from time to time, but placing fear and terror into the hearts of criminals around the city. And with these two movies, you've got all these kind of countercultural kind of revolutionaries and radicals running around trying to tear Gotham down to its roots. I feel like give them something to really complain about. Like let Batman show up and knock their fucking teeth out from time to time, and it'll just make everything much more interesting. So I guess this is all just a long-winded way of saying that the story feels incomplete without the Batman as part of the equation. Or at least dangle the possibility that he might show up at some point, and that way we can look forward to future movies and future installments. Like at the end of Batman Begins, Commissioner Gordon, or I think at that point he's just a captain, but he hands a calling card to the Batman and says that there's this new character on the scene called the Joker, and everybody was like, fuck yes! And they got everybody incredibly fired up for The Dark Knight in 2008, which obviously delivered a massive home run. Artistically, commercially, it was just a very satisfying movie-going experience. I do not expect Joker 2 to replicate that level of success. I don't even expect Joker 2 to replicate the level of success of the first movie. That first movie, I think it's a true anomaly. It still blows my mind that movie on like a $50 million budget grossed over $1 billion. And obviously Warner Brothers is hoping desperately this movie will replicate that level of success. I feel like Deadpool and Wolverine was the big R-rated superhero movie success of this year. This movie is just so dark and so grim and so unusual. I don't quite know how people are going to react, but I was hoping after the first one came out that it would lead to this tidal wave of all these R-rated movies. Usually if there's a successful movie in Hollywood, you see 50 or 60 movies come out that are trying to replicate that success. The R-rated revolution never came, apart from a few rare exceptions like The Suicide Squad and Deadpool and Wolverine. So in closing, before I get to my spoilers, let me just say, don't get me wrong. I love the fact that Todd Phillips has taken such a massive risk making this unconventional superhero movie or a supervillain movie, an R-rated movie with F-bombs, murder, sex, all that good stuff, but I'm old school. Great villains and great heroes, they need each other to reach their full potential, or at least, once again, like we need to have the hope that perhaps Batman might show up, but I can't really elaborate further on that until I get to the spoilers. So one last point before getting to the spoilers. Brendan Gleeson is actually really good in this. He kicks much ass as one of the security guards or prison guards who also is a closet kind of musical aficionado, and that's kind of Arthur Fleck's doorway into interacting with Harley Quinn. But he's a true icon of Irish cinema, as he reminded us of in the movie The Banshees of Inisherin. What was it, last year or the year before? But he's also totally unafraid to pop up in big Hollywood movies like Joker 2. But I loved Brendan Gleeson in this. He just goes for it. He's fantastic. But I think it's time to discuss a few mild spoilers. So last warning, if you're still listening, I hope you're with me, or I hope you've already seen it. But let's dive into some details in 3, 2, 1. So let's discuss the ending. I think the ending would be just fine if it were not a Joker movie. Like if it were just a movie about a psycho named Arthur Fleck who's being put on trial, who ultimately ends up getting, murdered by one of his copycat kind of psychos in prison, it would seem like it was like the perfect conclusion to what the story's been building toward. Like he's been creating, all these lunatics that are obsessed with like the Joker entity. And as he tries to kind of drift away from it, or tries to find love and happiness and that sort of thing, he inevitably becomes the victim of his own success as the Joker, and one of his imitators ends up just stabbing him to death in prison. And I was like, you know what, that would work. However, now we know he will never become the Clown Prince of Crime, and now we know he will never match wits with Batman, because part of the fun of Joker and Batman is like Joker always feels like a little kid who's trying to see how much can he get away with before his parents inevitably send him to his room, and he loves being chased by Batman, like that scene in The Dark Knight from 2008 when he's like, you complete me, like what would I do without you? Like it's that scene perfectly encapsulates everything about their relationship. How like they both need each other, even if they, obviously they're enemies. I mean, they've been beating the crap out of each other for many, many decades at this point. But like after the first Joker, everybody was thinking like, well, will there be like, a point where perhaps he bumps into Robert Pattinson, or will he have his own version of Batman, just like in the Arthur Fleck universe? But now that the story's over, we know that's never going to happen. So I think there'll be a lot of people like, wait a second, Batman's never going to show up? Like, fuck you, dude. That's not a Joker story. But there'll be other people like, come on, like, open up your mind and open up your heart. Like, we're allowed to see different kinds of stories with the Joker. But I find it a little frustrating that we get to this point where, like, Todd Phillips, it was never his goal to make, like, an ongoing saga that could lead into, like, not even necessarily a shared universe, but at least a series of movies involving Batman and Joker. So that's going to be a, an obstacle to this movie becoming a success. And another problem facing this movie is that it doesn't manage to completely escape the shadow of Martin Scorsese's film King of Comedy. And for a lot of my diehard like film nut friends, that was one of their biggest grievances with the original Joker, is that it was borrowing from Taxi Driver, but more specifically borrowing very heavily from King of Comedy, which was a big giant flop for Scorsese, but over the years has become one of his most beloved movies, like, a true classic of like cringe comedy where you just want to die from embarrassment while watching it. And there's a scene in this movie where comedian Tim Dillon shows up as a security guard. And I love Tim Dillon. He's absolutely hilarious. But he has Arthur Fleck autograph a book about all of his crimes. And he kind of whispers to another guard, like, this book's going to be worth a fortune after he gets put to death. And Arthur Fleck, initially he was going to say something like, come on and get happy, but he changes it to, I hope you get cancer, which is an echo of that brilliant scene from King of Comedy.
Jerry, would you please sign my autograph? Sign that magazine for me.
Yeah.
You're just wonderful. I've watched you your entire career. You're a joy to the world. Please, Laura, would you just please say something to my nephew Morris on the phone? He's in the hospital.
I'm sorry, I'm late.
You should only get cancer. I hope you get cancer. Jerry?
One of the best scenes in that movie about the nature of fandom, where people love and adore their heroes and look up to them, but like the smallest little thing or the slightest like disappointment might turn them on you and turn them into complete and total psychos that are praying that you die from fucking cancer. But like Todd Phillips with this new movie, I feel like because he was going to the musical direction, I feel like he should have just completely embraced the musical thing and just left King of Comedy alone. So those criticisms about King of Comedy and Joker are inevitably going to come up again, at least for people who know that movie well and are going to see this one. And my last concern about this movie is not really a spoiler, but it's more just like a general concern. But Todd Phillips built his reputation off making people laugh and laugh hard. I mean, Road Trip, Old School, and The Hangover, those were wildly entertaining comedies. And like The Hangover 2 and 3, like whatever, I can kind of take them or leave them. But like, it's just bizarre to me that like one of the world's most successful living directors of comedies can't get comedies financed, or feels like the culture has changed in a way where like, he's not necessarily allowed to make the kind of comedies that he would like to make, because he likes, kind of like true, vulgar, frat guy comedies, the kind of comedies where every single scene is going to offend somebody. But he embraces that idea that the Dave Chappelle has often espoused, where somebody has to be sacrificed on the altar for everybody else's entertainment. So inevitably, if somebody's not getting offended, well, then you're not really trying that hard with your comedies. Or at least that's how his early comedies felt. But this movie is such a grim, joyless slog in a lot of ways, where there are no jokes. There's just like these weird musical sequences and a lot of depressing scenes in jail where like Arthur's getting beaten up by the guards and that sort of thing. And at some point, Todd Phillips, I feel like, kind of needs to get back to what he does well. I feel like just, showing like, outrageous nudity and outrageous comedy and just taking us to strange, dark places that nobody's willing to go to. And I feel like right now, because we get so few comedies like that outside the world of stand-up, like if you go to a comedy club, you're going to hear some raunchy shit. But in movies, almost never. But I feel like that's an incredible opportunity. Because so few R-rated, like outrageous, raunchy comedies get made these days, I feel like the first person who's willing to kind of take it on the chin and give us a great one and like hold nothing back and basically kill all the sacred cows and like, like criticisms be damned. Like it doesn't matter what critics say, it doesn't matter what people say online, as long as people show up and buy tickets and laugh. That's all that matters with comedies. But I feel like Todd Phillips, of all the directors out there, he might be one of the people that could make the comedy kind of stage a comeback, and he can tell anybody who objects to his style of comedy, to go fuck themselves. Because when I hear people say, oh, you couldn't make a movie like Road Trip today, you couldn't make a movie like Old School today, you couldn't make a movie like The Hangover today, like they wouldn't allow you to do so. I'm like, well, who the hell are they? Like, as long as you sell tickets and people like it and they laugh, that's all you got to worry about. And if a few, well-known trade publications are like, oh, shame on you, and wag their finger in disapproval, talking about how, you've committed a hate crime by making people laugh. But like, if you're willing to just ignore those people, once again, like go to any comedy club in Austin, Texas, or New York or LA, you will see comedians saying the most merciless, unforgivable, just reprehensible, diabolical shit imaginable, and you will see hundreds of people, if not thousands of people, screaming with laughter. People still love comedy. The audience is still there. The audience has not gone away. Just Hollywood has lost all their testicular fortitude and is just completely, totally unwilling to make those kind of comedies anymore, even though they have a history over many, many decades of making vast sums of money. So long story short, I don't think Todd Phillips' heart is really in the superhero genre like James Gunn. His heart is in the superhero genre. Between Super and his 3 Guardians of the Galaxy movies and The Suicide Squad and now his upcoming Superman movie, clearly James Gunn loves the superhero genre. But with this movie, I think Todd Phillips enjoys courtroom dramas and musicals and men in prison movies much more than like superhero movies. So it's like, get back to make, I guess he figured I can make a big successful franchise if it at least resembles a superhero movie or a supervillain movie, but I would like to see him get back to doing what he does best. And I feel like the superhero genre has kind of run its course. The golden age is over, and it's time for some other genres to make a comeback. So I enjoyed this movie. I was surprised by a lot of scenes. I got chills from a couple scenes, but it's definitely long. It's definitely got a frustrating ending if you are a Batman fan. So it is a mixed bag, but 100% worth seeing. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if a lot of people absolutely love and adore it, but it also wouldn't surprise me if a lot of people hate it with every fiber of their being. So on that note, I'm going to wrap up this video. Hope you enjoyed my reaction to the film. If so, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell. But I hope everybody has a great week. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.